After 2.5 long years, Young Thug is finally free. They freed the GOAT. Jeff is free, and this is really one of the most legendary weeks in hip-hop that we've seen in a long time. We got Thug regaining his freedom. We got a new Tyler album, a new Freddie Gibbs album, a new Uzi album, which was terrible off the first listen. Stay tuned for the review on that. Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre even announced they were getting back together to drop a new album in December. So life is good right now, but things could have gone way worse for Young Thug. He was looking at 45 years in prison. He rejected a plea deal that would have gotten him immediate freedom, and he said, no, I'm going to leave the decision in the judge's hand. Prosecutors wanted him to face 45 years in prison, but the judge decided to let him out on October 31st, 2024, under many stipulations, however. And we're going to break down the entire sentencing in this video, understanding how Young Thug got freed today, all the events that led up to this, and how his newfound freedom will affect his career. Because again, there's a couple stipulations that will play a very important role in the changes that Thug will need to make to not only his character, but also his music. So let's break it all down. First, I never mentioned this at the beginning of the video. I always wait to the end because I'm just appreciative you guys are here. But if you are here, in honor of Young Thug, smash that like button and let's get this video to 1,017 likes, 1017 Brick Squad, because that's where it all started for Young Thug. Or let's get it to 1,031 likes, 10/31, because that is the date they freed Young Thug. I know that's already a holiday. Happy Halloween to all you guys, but they should make this a second holiday, because with everything Young Thug was faced with, everything he was accused of, and the sentence that they wanted to give him, it's a miracle that he's out today. So thank you to the judge. Thank you to Thug's lawyer, Brian Steele. Thank you to you guys, and let's get on with this breakdown. So where it all started was in May 2022. Young Thug and 27 other people were arrested in Atlanta. The prosecutors accused YSL of being a criminal street gang. Young Thug said it was just his record label. According to prosecutors, YSL stood for Young Slime Life when it's gang-related, but Thug has insisted that it means Young Stoner Life as a record label. Now, the big charge that Thug and his 27 co-defendants were facing was called the RICO Act. You can think of RICO like this. Instead of charging someone for individual crimes, prosecutors can charge a whole group of people for being part of an organization that commits these crimes. The RICO Act is the same law they used against big criminal organizations like the mob to take down a whole group of people instead of just one person. Now, Thug's indictment stated that YSL was a criminal enterprise, and they prove it by listing 182 different acts they accused members of the group committing. These acts took place between 2013 and 2022, and they included horrible accusations like murder, attempted murder, armed robbery, drug dealing, theft, and witness intimidation. An important detail is that not everyone is charged with every crime. Instead, the prosecutors were trying to prove that everyone who was charged was helping YSL operate as a criminal organization in some way, and that Young Thug was the head of this criminal organization. A key player in this whole case, as you guys probably know, was Young Thug's artist Gunna, who took what's called an Alford plea in December 2022. This meant that he pleaded guilty while still maintaining his innocence. He was sentenced to 5 years, with 1 year served in prison and the rest on probation, and he was released after serving about 8 months. And the case was an absolute mess from the very beginning. Again, Young Thug was locked up on May of 2022, but the trial only started in November of 2023, over 6 months later. Jury selection also took almost an entire year, which is one of the longest in Georgia history, and the prosecutors used some extremely controversial evidence, including song lyrics from Young Thug and others, claiming they describe real criminal acts, and Young Thug's lawyer even stated that they used lyrics against Young Thug that he never even rapped. Thug's lawyers were arguing that the use of rap lyrics as evidence were very unfair and racist. Young Thug should never have been held responsible for other people's actions just because they're signed to his YSL label, and that YSL was only just a record label and artistic movement, not a gang. Thug's lawyer also stated that Thug was surviving off of Dorito bags in jail. He gained 70 pounds while he was awaiting trial, and that he's not in the best condition health-wise right now, so pray for his health. Throughout the trial, he requested bond many times. He was denied each and every time. The judge had expressed concern about witness intimidation and the possibility of him influencing the case if he was released. And again, Thug was facing potential decades in prison, with the specific charges against him including conspiracy to violate RICO, participation in criminal street gang activity, drug charges, weapon possession, and murder conspiracy. And what's scary is the outcome of this case has big implications for how music, especially lyrics, can be used in criminal cases in the future. There's still 14 defendants within the case outside of Young Thug that are awaiting sentencing. One of the defendants before Young Thug, Lil Rod, accepted 10 years in prison, commuted to time served. he pled guilty to one charge, the RICO charge, and another defendant in the case, who went by Quay, was facing 3 life sentences, which is around 100 years in prison. And he took a plea deal where he pleaded guilty to some of the charges faced against him and reduced his sentence from 100 years down to 9 years, including the 4 years of prison that he's already served. And I misspoke earlier in this video, it's actually only 4 people still awaiting trial besides Thug, not 14. Now, as Quay was getting sentenced, Young Thug was very close to coming to an agreement. He was negotiating with the prosecutors to take some sort of plea deal. He was offered a plea deal that would have allowed him to come home with 15 years of probation, but he did not agree to the special conditions that the prosecutors were proposing within the plea deal. Instead, Young Thug ended the plea negotiations with the state and he entered a non-negotiated plea. This is a legal plea where the defendant neither accepts or denies the charges against them. Instead, the defendant accepts the charge and agrees to the sentencing and fine. He pleaded no contest to the RICO count and the gang leader count. The rest of the charges he pleaded guilty. Prosecutors objected this, but the judge accepted it. And the state also asked to seize all of Young Thug's property, including his cars and his jewelry. Young Thug obviously did not agree to that. And because he rejected the prosecutor's plea deal, they then recommended that Young Thug be sentenced to 45 years with 25 years served in prison. With his non-negotiated plea, obviously Young Thug asked the judge for what they think is fair. Then the state asked for what they want, and they were recommending 45 years with 25 to serve in prison. And then ultimately, the judge decides Thug's sentencing. Now, before the judge made her final sentencing, Young Thug's lawyer was arguing that the prosecution had misstated and misrepresented the evidence, and then argued that that evidence was the state's theory. One of the accusations against Young Thug came from a 2013 traffic stop where a firearm was found in the vehicle that Thug was driving. However, that firearm was not linked to Young Thug, and the dashcam footage from that traffic stop was never given to Young Thug's lawyers, and they allege that it could quote-unquote not be found. The state also used lyrics against Young Thug like "F the judge" and "I rap my life for real." However, these lyrics were never actually rapped from Young Thug, yet they tried to blame Young Thug for those lyrics. Thug's lawyer also said he was not supportive or against the plea that Young Thug took, and told Young Thug that they would win the trial, but he was okay with either decision, because he knew Thug was insisting on taking this deal since he couldn't handle 3 more months of not being home with his kids and his family. And the state, again, was ready to let Young Thug go home if he accepted a plea that required him to testify to being a gang leader and saying that his music encouraged people to commit violence. He rejected all those conditions, so he walked away from the plea deal, and now all of a sudden they started recommending that he be sentenced to 25 years. Young Thug's lawyer instead asked the judge to sentence him for the time served in prison and let him out with 3 years on house arrest with an ankle monitor. So again, the state wanted him to testify, and if he did, he could have came home that day. Thug rejected that. His lawyer instead proposed that he be on house arrest for the next 3 years. State said because he rejected their plea deal, he should be sentenced to 25 years in prison. And because Thug took a non-negotiated plea, it's now up to the judge to decide the sentencing that Thug gets. And luckily, the judge was able to see behind all of the misrepresentation and the misstatements of evidence from the prosecution against Young Thug. Because of all the lyrics that they used against Young Thug that weren't even his, the judge came to the conclusion that Young Thug is not a danger to society and gave him a sentencing even better than the one that Thug's lawyer was suggesting with 3 years on house arrest. Instead, he was released a free man on October 31st with 15 years of probation. Now, this probation is a very scary thing because there's a lot of stipulations in it that could be very hard to follow, and if Thug doesn't follow it, then he ends back up in jail. Some of these stipulations include Young Thug being banned from Metro Atlanta, not being able to go back to his hometown. He has to do 4 presentations or concerts per year that are against gang violence. He can travel only for work or to make music. Young Thug can't use any hand sign terminology or language that promotes or represents any criminal street gang directly or indirectly. Now, I'm not sure if this means he can't say things like slime or slat, but I'm assuming similarly to 6ix9ine not being able to use the word treyway when he was sentenced, Young Thug probably can't rap about anything slime related. He also can't have contact with any associate of a criminal street gang or any of the individuals that were named in this indictment with Young Thug. except for his biological brother and an individual in the case that Young Thug's lawyer personally requested, who the world knows as Gunna. Court documents say that for as long as Gunna and Young Thug are contractually obligated, they are allowed to be in contact only for the lawful business of Young Thug's music career. He also has to submit to random drug screens. He's got to abstain from the use of any drug that's not prescribed by a licensed physician, and he can't break any of the laws of the state of Georgia or any state in America. And while this is obviously great news for the fact that Young Thug is now a free man, between all the stipulations within his plea deal, all the restrictions that Young Thug now has, especially the worst one coming from the fact that he can't go back to his hometown or be in contact with the defendants within this case, who are people that Young Thug grew up with, or between the fact that Young Thug didn't fully claim his innocence, he still accepted a plea deal and resultingly had to plead guilty to some of the charges filed against him instead of pleading innocence and taking the entire thing to trial. Because of that, while Young Thug might be happy to be coming home, his lawyer Brian Steele harbored some personal unhappiness with the outcome of the trial. In a press conference after the trial, Young Thug's lawyer said, "As far as Thug is feeling now, he knows my feelings, which I'm not going to reveal for attorney-client privilege. But this is not the same as a not guilty verdict." He went into detail about the way that Young Thug was treated while he was in custody and specifically pointed out to the poor conditions of his cell. He had said, "Nobody here wakes up every day on a concrete floor that they're calling his bed at 4:15 a.m. He gets shackled at his feet, his waist, and his hands, comes to Fulton County Courthouse to be on concrete, eating out of a bag, and then coming to the courthouse to sit there with a leg chained every single day and hear lie after lie." So for Jeffrey to go home today and not have another 90 days, 120 days of the trial, he is very happy. Now, before we go any further, we have to point out how dedicated Young Thug's lawyer was to helping him beat this case. Back in June, Thug's lawyer Brian Steele was raising concerns to the judge about a meeting that had taken place between the judge and the prosecution and one of the other co-defendants, Lil Woody, and Young Thug's defense team was never notified of this meeting. Brian Steele had said that this meeting was inappropriate and that his team had a constitutional right to know what happened behind closed doors. But the judge was more concerned with who was leaking the information to Steele than the fact that this meeting ever took place to begin with. Steele had refused to tell the judge who told him about the meeting, citing his ethical responsibility to his client, Young Thug, and the judge then held Steele in contempt of court for refusing to divulge his sources, and then he sentenced Young Thug's lawyer to 20 days in jail over the next 10 weekends. Being so dedicated to win this case, Brian Steele requested that he served his time in jail with his client, Young Thug, at the Cobb County Jail so they could work on their case together. And in order to appeal the charges brought against him, Young Thug's lawyer, Brian Steele, was being represented by his wife. So imagine how dedicated you have to be to your job and to your client's freedom, where you'll refuse to divulge information to the judge if it potentially affects your client's case, aka he didn't snitch, and instead, the actual lawyer that was representing Young Thug had to go and spend multiple nights in jail. Now, Young Thug got up on the stand and said a couple really important words as he was being sentenced. He spoke on the fact that he was caught up in a lot of these crimes because he was trying to be quote-unquote nice or cool to the people around him, but has realized that when you're in a position of power, you can't necessarily be like that just because you could get implicated into things you had nothing to do with. He also said that he came from nothing and he built something, but due to this case, he wasn't able to take full advantage of it. He had also said that throughout the last 2.5 years of his life, while he was standing on trial, this new judge was the best thing that ever happened to him because she made everything fair. If you guys don't know, the judge that was previously on this case was removed from the case for having that meeting with the prosecutors and the witness within the case and did not include the defense team. Like I mentioned before, Young Thug's lawyer, Brian Steele, had brought it to the court's attention that the judge had these meetings behind their back. He was sentenced to time in jail for not disclosing where he heard that information from, but eventually justice was served and that judge was removed from the case and a new one was instead brought onto the case, who Young Thug says was much more fair. Thug also says that he's going to be committed to now being better as a person, doing better as a person. He knows the heights he's reached and the impact that he has on the people within his community, and that he knows what he means to this world, even if he might have discovered that late. He also mentioned a bunch of free shows that he did that generated millions of dollars that he gave back to different charities, and said he's very open and happy to do that within the future. And in my opinion, the most interesting thing he said was that he's realized that no matter how much change and positivity he brought to his community, he does understand that rap lyrics could be twisted or could influence the mind in possibly a negative way. And he promises to the judge that he's going to change that because he's older now, he's smarter, he has more positive things to rap about. And he's experienced a lot of good things, and so he's going to put that into his music rather than the possible negativity that now the state and the judge are banning him from mentioning in his music. And I think this is a double-edged sword, right? And it's a very important thing, a very important discussion to have within hip-hop. Firstly, I think it's a horrible thing that the prosecutors were able to get away with using Young Thug's lyrics against him. Music is a form of expression. Music is an outlet of creativity. Lyrics may not necessarily be 100% true, and even if they are, it's a reflection of the life, the hardship, the struggle, the pain, whatever it is that the artist has lived through in the past. And it's a positive outlet to be able to express those emotions in a non-violent way. You can only imagine that when you come up in the conditions that many lower income African Americans or just people in general are subjected to, it's very hard to escape that. Society does not make it easy or doesn't grant the proper opportunities for these people to be able to escape that. And as a result, it creates this bad cycle of criminal activity, typically used as a means to gain financial stability to support your family or escape that impoverished community that you grew up in. Then for someone like Young Thug to escape that and then use his music as almost like a therapeutic tool to document his life and reflect on his hardship, to then resultingly getting rich off that music, being able to influence the next generation and give back to his community, those very same lyrics that gave Young Thug the chance to escape his neighborhood and be able to give back to it should not be used against him in a court of law as factual evidence. We don't go after Quentin Tarantino for selling narcotics just because he made movies like Pulp Fiction. Art might imitate life, but lyrics or script writing shouldn't be used as factual evidence to prove that something happened. And it'll be interesting to see how the state chooses to use Lil Durk's lyrics against him, as he recently got locked up for similar charges to Young Thug, and also, just like Young Thug, raps about criminal activity. But on the other side of that, it is great to see Young Thug acknowledge that as he grows older, as he matures, as he escapes those poor conditions that he grew up in, which maybe led him to resort to different criminal activities, he's now in a position of great influence, of great wealth, and can rap about more mature subject matter that will inspire the youth in a more positive direction. We've definitely seen a big rise over the last few years in street rappers, in violent subject matter within music, and it would be inspiring to see someone like Young Thug, who has been such a major influence in this current generation of not only rappers, but also the youth in general, to take a more positive turn and make music with a more positive message. I see a lot of people saying online that Young Thug now is going to have nothing to rap about if he can't rap about criminal activity, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. A lot of Young Thug's best songs don't contain violence as the focal point of the subject matter within them. Look at his recent collaboration with Metro Boomin called Metro Spider, where he's rapping about not only his life of luxury, but also the added responsibility of having his own label, having to move smarter, and also having kids to feed and inspire. Or one of his biggest hits, Digits, which was about moving forward amidst any hardship within your life. And a lot of Young Thug's greatest hits don't necessarily come from him talking about anything violent, but more so just flaunting a life of luxury. Songs like Check, songs like Hot, and especially with just sitting trial for the last 2.5 years, I'm sure Young Thug has a lot to rap about in terms of the time he spent reflecting, in terms of what he saw in the courtroom, in terms of the changes that he wants to now make as a man. I mean, just his 4-minute speech to the judge alone could be turned into a very inspirational song. So I wouldn't worry too much about what Young Thug can rap about, or if he'll be able to make as good of music today as he was before he was locked up, because he's rapped about inspirational, non-violent things in the past, and with this recent hunger to restart his career, I'm sure he'll be more than motivated to make some of the best music in his career going forward. And the judge responded to Young Thug by comparing hip-hop music to WWE, where the wrestlers would kind of posture up and pretend like they hated each other, but it was all for show. And while she kind of minimizes the actual authenticity or creativity that goes behind creating art, it's refreshing to see that she understands the danger of using a rapper's lyrics against them in court. And she did say regardless of whether or not the lyrics were fake, they still had tremendous impact on kids who want to grow up and be quote-unquote cool, just like the rappers they were listening to, which would lead them down a path of criminal activity since that's what they're listening to within the music. And she said that if Young Thug does continue to rap, he needs to use his influence to make kids realize that a life of crime is not the way to go, and that there are ways out of poverty besides clicking up with the powerful guy on the corner of the street who's selling narcotics. And ultimately, she decided that because the state was willing to let Young Thug walk away with simply 15 years of probation if he testified, whether or not he did testify, she deemed that if the state was willing to give him this type of deal, then they did not view him as a danger to society, and because he accepted the plea and quote-unquote admitted his guilt to several of the charges, she let him go with the same deal that the state had initially offered him, 15 years probation, and he walked away a free man on October 31st. I'm very curious to see the type of music Young Thug is going to make in the future. I'm very curious to see if he's also going to be collaborating again with Gunna. While him and his lawyer did request that he be able to still remain in contact with Gunna for music-related purposes, it's not necessarily specified that Young Thug wants to actually collaborate with Gunna. But if you guys didn't know, Gunna is signed to Young Thug's label. It's unclear still whether or not Young Thug approved of Gunna taking the plea deal that he did about a year ago, where he had to testify and say that YSL was a gang. It's unclear whether or not Young Thug was okay with that, or if he just wants to remain in contact with Gunna for business-related purposes in order to, aka, just basically profit off his music and keep him as an artist. We have seen a lot of other artists who were previously affiliated with Young Thug and with Gunna come out and refuse to work with him. Guys like Future, guys like Lil Baby, rappers like Lil Durk. But man, the world needs Young Thug and Gunna music. I think if Thug truly wants to make that positive change in the world, then he will click back up with Gunna and give us more classics. And aside from that, there truly were some insane and hilarious moments within this entire case. The more insane ones being the prosecutors rapping Young Thug's lyrics and trying to use them against him in court.
Any message to the rest of the defense attorneys still fighting for their clients in this case?
Good luck. You know.
Hey, this is that slime. Hey, YSL. Hey, killing 12. Hey, a jail. Hey, cooking white brick. I'm not new to this. Hey, so I'm not new to this. Hey, I'm so true to this. Hey, I done put up a whole slime of 100 licks. Slime or get slime.
Some of the funnier ones being them playing Young Thug's music in court and seeing him and his lawyer kind of bob their head to his classic tracks.
Hey, everybody can't quit that file.
And all in all, it's great to see that one of the most influential figures within hip-hop in the last 10 years is finally back free. Hip-hop has not felt the same without his presence, without the constant release of new mixtapes and albums from him. So I'm extremely excited to see what Young Thug is going to do. I'm kind of excited to see that regardless of whether or not it was ethical for the state to use his lyrics against him, which I definitely don't believe it is great to see that Young Thug has recognized that he has matured and that he should be rapping about more positive things in the future to help the youth, to help the next generation be inspired to make that positive change for themselves. So let me know what you guys think. What are you expecting in the future from Young Thug? When do you think we'll hear that first day out track from him? Do you think we'll get new music from him and Gunna? What do you think he's going to be rapping about? What do you want to hear him rap about? What do you want to see next from me? Let me know, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.
There's a lot of little nuggets in both of their disses that if it wasn't for these breakdowns, and salute to, you know, guys like this, Rapaholics, because I think they directly get it.